All right. I think I'm about ready to get started. All right, everyone. Welcome to my live stream. I'm going to talk to you uh about what happened on Wednesday. Okay, just a second. That's not good. Not there yet. In a moment, I'm going to talk to you about the right things. All right. Should be there now. Let me check. Sorry, that took me forever. All right. So I was there on Wednesday when Charlie Kirk was assassinated. I had taken my son to come and watch him because I thought that it would be important for him to see civil discourse. He had not really heard of Charlie Kirk. I mean, he'd seen like maybe a few clips here and there, but we're much more of he's much more interested in Tim Pool. So I thought that it would be good for him to see discourse. He's a senior, he's in debate. I thought that would be a great idea. I'm also the state director of Utah Moms for America. So I brought a group of moms with me. And we're all so excited. Um, I do think that there was kind of a foreboding, like what what's going to happen in terms of agitators. I just expected them to do what normally happens. They knock down a tent or something or yell and scream. And actually, I kind of wanted my son to see that because I felt that if he did, um, it would just give him kind of a glimpse into my world, and also to see that people react, I would say, as toddlers. So we get there and there's so many people, and I'm going out and giving them my business card, just different people, and some people who are different um, ethnic minorities, especially different Latin groups were there. And it was so cool to see them because they were like, we love Charlie Kirk. And I was like, you do, you're not supposed to, just like I'm not supposed to. And we were just talking, and they were like, no, I want my kids to love this country. I want them to have good values. I don't want them to see themselves as victims. All of the normal stuff, right? The normal stuff that if you follow my channel at all, this is what I talk about all the time. So it was a party atmosphere. It was too hot. It was too hot, but it was a party atmosphere. And I honestly thought, oh, my son could go to this school. There's enough people here who seem to be based, as I would say, that he could go to the school and he would be fine. And I had given him a question. I'm not going to lie. I'd given him a question that I wanted him to ask Charlie Kirk because I thought it would be more powerful coming from a teenager than coming from a mother. And the question was based on things that he and I talk about on a regular basis. How can I stand up when our social media has been taken from us? Basically, our phones have been taken from us in the classroom. And I know that's divided on both sides of the aisle, but when their phones are taken from them in the classroom and a teacher wants to say things to them, and we will get into the things that happen, a teacher wants to say things to them, they no longer have proof. And unfortunately, so many of our educational institutions side with leftist ideology that your kid is left defenseless. So we talked about that before. He's the one who expressed it to me, and I just said, that's the perfect question to ask. Why don't you ask it? So he was in line to ask the question. And honestly, I have no other thing. It was an absolute miracle that at the time of the gunshot, so this first man, he gets up and he talks for about 22 minutes. It was a really long time. And I remember looking at my clock going, holy cow, this guy is talking for a very, very long time. Um, and who knows if that has anything to do with it or not. I don't know. I don't like to guess on things like that. But it was a really long time when there's a huge line, probably of 60 people ready to ask a question. So he talks and he asks Charlie Kirk about religion. We're in Utah. Charlie Kirk is like me. He's an evangelical Christian living in LDS stronghold of Utah. Um, Although that's another thing that we will get to. So, and he's so gracious. He even says, I feel like maybe I'm going to be set up here, but I love Mormons. I love their values. And he said, and I don't think he was joking. He said, you need to get back to what you were before as opposed to what's going on now. And of course, that does not mean for everyone, but there is a progressive infiltration. There are groups, I will mention them in this broadcast. But he said, but I love people. And I think that the fact that he was able to say that and to stand up for his own faith as the last thing that he did, that was exactly what he said he wanted his legacy to be. So the person asked their questions. When they were finally finished, the next person got up, and his question was about trans shooters and Trump saying they shouldn't have guns. And Charlie answered, and he said something along the lines of, so how many shooters have there been? And the other guy said, how many shooters? And then he responded, there have been five. And yeah, that's too many, but there have been five. And Charlie said something about gangs and pop. And we heard a pop. And it was shocking. People were turning around. It was kind of like, did we just hear a firecracker? And somebody said, Charlie's been shot. Everybody get down. So the video, and I'm very aware of the video because my husband caught a lot of the footage that's been all over the news. But what people didn't see is that everybody got down on the ground, or most of us got down on the ground. And if there were people around us that we could try to cover, we were trying to do that. We were literally trying to pull them in and get people to stay down on the ground. And I remember thinking very, very clearly, it's going to be the back of my head or it'll be my back. And I hope it's fast. But even if it's not, it's okay. It's okay because I've been doing the work I'm supposed to be doing. And there was something so peaceful about that moment, thinking that we were all going to be Charlie. And so I have no idea the time, and I'm hesitant to say because people will just jump on and call you a liar, right? So it felt like 5 minutes. I'm sure it was less than a minute that we were down before we got up and everybody started running. But it was enough time to think those thoughts, whatever it was. And then I could not find my son. Remember, he was in that front row. And I could not find him. And so I was screaming my son's name, which I will not say because unfortunately, we are not safe to say our children's names as conservatives in this fight. And it is a fight. And so I was calling his name. And I was walking up the stairs and there was a group of the protesters and they had all of these signs. The biggest one that I think people need to be aware of was a sign that said, I was here when Utah flipped blue. That's important. That is very important to the rest of this whole why things are happening the way they are. And there were signs that were anti-Christian and there were signs that weren't so. They were just, Jesus was an immigrant. There were just, LGBTQ pro signs. And as soon as people realized that there wasn't going to be any more shooting, some of those people, not all of them, but some of them started saying, he's dead. Wow, I'm glad. He deserved it. And I did not have my most gracious moment. As I walked up those stairs, I was saying, yeah, so much for your kind and inclusive, right? You're inclusive, everybody belongs, all that belonging. And I was in shock to the point First, I couldn't find my son. So I'm in the shock to the point that my hand is shaking like this. I can't even pick up my phone. And I'm watching, and those kids sit down, and I just feel the need to walk over to them. So I walk over to them and I said, you know what? This is what happens when you're taught to divide, when you're taught to other, when you're taught to believe that people who disagree with you don't deserve to exist. This is what happens. And those kids who were probably freshmen, maybe sophomores, they were not seniors, I don't think, at UVU, said, we're traumatized. Why would you tell us this? I will tell you this because their kids are being taught to hate. 100%. It's what they're being taught. And Charlie Kirk, whether you like him or not, and I would encourage you because all of his videos are out. There were things I'd never heard. I got these lists of, well, he said this and he said this and he said this. And especially as a Black woman, do you know he said this? And so I've been listening to the full context of what he said. Because normally you just get those little clips when you're, driving and it flips through. I didn't watch him as a regular. He wasn't on my playlist. But I've been watching and listening to him, and I think that he was truthful. And that is a huge problem. But more than that is he was logical. So he would bring out as much evidence as he could, statistics and everything else as he's talking. He's like a walking encyclopedia as he's talking and bringing up these points. And what I noticed from the other people is they're relying on feelings, not facts, over and over again. And the talking points are the same talking points that I hear as a parental rights advocate all the time. They're talking points that can be debunked like that. The problem is people don't even want to hear it. They just jump on this bandwagon, and that bandwagon is a cultural revolution. So if you'll bear with me, I'm going to open up my notes just to make sure that I stay on task here. Yes, so several people asked, how could this happen in Utah? And I just want to give you an example of what's been going on in Utah. I was not surprised by this. One of my friends is Lady MAGA. Lady MAGA made a post about getting told that, they want to throw bricks at his head. I have gone to Weber State University a couple of years ago to speak, to defend our position on being anti-DEI, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I went with Senator Johnson to Weber State, and students protested me. At this time, I was a first grade teacher's aide, probably the least harmful person that you could ever find. Children of every color, disability, whatever, they love me. That's who I am. And I get there and I find out I have to have a police escort. And I'm like, what? And then all of these kids have made signs. And so they've got these signs and they're holding them up and they say, why do you hate diversity? And they have opinions in their head of who I am, having never once met me because somebody told them to. And at the end, so every time I would speak, every single time, the crowd who would come in, and I will give you credit, they were silent. They would turn their backs every single time I spoke. And the reason they did that is because there was a woman in the crowd. She was ahead of their chapter's NAACP. National Civil, the rights for colored people, right? We need to be really clear on things like this. The things that we have always thought were good have more often than you would expect, been co-opted. So the NAACP does not stand for the things that it used to stand for. It now stands for social justice, which I would call social injustice, because I think that whenever you switch one side and put the other side in its place and say, now you can be rotten because this side was rotten, we haven't really progressed. We haven't moved forward. We are just swinging the pendulum and encouraging hatred, which is something I'm fundamentally against. Hating people without knowing anything about them. Trust me, there are people in this world who will give you a reason to dislike them. They'll give you a reason to be sickened by them. I'm sure many of you have seen it. If you've seen any of the posts and the mainstream leftist media on a 31-year-old young man being shot and killed in front of a bunch of young people who looked up to him, including his 3-year-old daughter and his 1-year-old son. And people feel justified in their victimhood. Again, this is very specific to Utah. So a few years ago, when I spoke with Senator Johnson at Weber State, students protested me. They turned their backs every time I spoke. Before I even entered the building, I needed a police escort. And when I left, I had to have a police escort as well. The president of the teachers, or not the president, teachers union, the students union at Weber State presented me with a paper with their commitments. These two white, one boy, one girl kids came up and presented me with their commitments to DEI. And I was frustrated in that meeting, just as frustrated as I am now, because we are infantilizing these kids and telling them they're stunning and brave for doing it. So here's the thing. My message to those kids, had I been allowed to fully get it out, is, well, first off, I'm biracial, right? You can see that. So I'm biracial. I also grew up and aged out of the foster system after a horrific childhood that includes everything except, until this week, having someone killed in front of me. Everything else on the ACEs scale had already happened. So sexual abuse, physical abuse, mental abuse, you name it, I've been through it. And I don't embrace the victim narrative. And that's what makes me scary in Utah. That's what makes it so people have made some pretty vicious threats about me in Utah, because I don't embrace my victimhood, and I encourage other people not to do the same. So the issue here is that the students were convinced by professors that even hearing my message would cause them emotional harm. Do you get it? Do you see that connection? The whole I am Charlie. We are supposed to be so self-censoring that we can't have conversations, because our children are being taught that to hear words that hurt them is emotional harm. Right now on my own Facebook page, I have an attorney who's saying, oh, well, it turns out some people don't like hearing bad things, and justifying killing someone because you don't like to hear bad things. Or you don't, not even bad things, just things that you don't like. There was another person, a man, who made a list of all of the things Charlie Kirk should never have been allowed to say. He said, in his defense, he said Charlie should never have been shot. But here's some things he should never have been allowed to say. In Stronghold, Mormon, Utah, he felt that it was wrong for the words, wives obey your husband. Now, here's the thing. There's more to that verse. It's wives obey your husband, but husbands love your wives like Christ loved the church. That's our faith. There are many, many girls who would like a strong enough husband that they feel like they could respect. That's factual. That happens all the time. You get to be a stay-at-home mom. Wow, I really want to do that. And I really want to homeschool. And they say it in hushed tones as if it's something to be ashamed of. And it's not. But in Stronghold, Utah, feminism rules supreme. So that same message that victim is a virtue is everywhere in Utah. And let me tell you where it starts. It starts really early. It starts with Head Start programs, early childhood educations, teaching inclusive preschool curricula. Inclusive, meaning that we're starting to queer education for small children. There was a teacher friend of mine, was being the operative word. She was going to school to be a teacher, and she shared with me a bunch of papers in Utah at UVU about how at their early education classes, they were going to learn how to queer early childhood literacy. That's at UVU. At UVU, I was once asked to speak to a group of social workers and teachers online with another person. And as we were talking, a person said, I can't understand how do I grade papers without considering their race? Again, that's UVU. And UVU is not the only one. So I don't want to attack just UVU, right? I mean, I'm sorry, I'm going to go Weber, UVU. These are ones that I'm familiar with. I know that we have other schools that have changed their names to be woke, to be progressive. So what we have here is a safety culture. So let me go. That was just preschool. So these children are taught to see color before they would naturally learn to see color. See, babies do not care. Stupid Ibram X. Kendi with his anti-racist baby, he is projecting his own constant obsession with race onto babies. But many times in my life, I have been a nanny or I've babysat children. And I become the person that they oftentimes call mama because I'm with them for a couple of hours a day or sometimes the whole day, depending. They don't see color. Usually it happens. I remember the first time a foster sister of mine, I lived with them for about 3 years, foster cousin, sorry. I lived with them for about 3 years. We're in the pool one time. We're swimming and she looks at me, she stops and she goes, Carrie, you're Black. And I was like, yep. I remember my son, it happened for him earlier. He and his little best friend were in the bathtub together. His best friend's taking his bath, and all of a sudden he looks at him and he goes, Dante, you're brown. And Dante looked very down, very shyly, and he goes, yeah. And my son goes, I'm pink, except for when I'm cold, then I'm purple. That's how kids take it. That's how kids take it unless they're taught to see it differently. This is the natural order of things, and that is a huge threat. The elite, the progressive elite, do not want a natural order of things, and Utah is covered with the elite who actually think they are truly better, that they are divinely better than people in their communities. So elites tell us what is natural isn't good. And they push the idea that innocence itself is a threat. Innocence, a child knowing the difference between a boy and a girl, is a threat. It can cause somebody emotional harm. And emotional harm now apparently is justifiable for the worst atrocities. So by elementary school, young kids are taught to censor themselves in the name of being a good friend. A good friend can't be different in a way that makes somebody uncomfortable. So in the name of being a good friend, this is early social and emotional learning. Parents will not recognize it unless you are deep in the parental rights advocacy and deep in the studying of where this leads to. You will not recognize it because it will come in songs. It will come in, hand games. It will come in different things. But sometimes your kids may say something like, He has more privilege than me. I have a friend who's got mixed kids, and both of them, and one of them is lighter than the other, and they now have those conversations, and they do not have social media. They're in elementary school. Not that that means anything, but for them, it's the case. So in middle school, many look at the cool teacher. I get that because I am that. And too many of those teachers are also activists. That I am not. The kids don't get to know what I do. But there are many activists who stick up on their walls. In my classroom, this is a safe place. If your parents don't support you, I'm your new mommy now. There are people, there are clubs like GSA, clubs like that, where they favor the kids who are in the club. The kids in the club, they might get pizza, they might get candy. Oh my goodness, the teacher might actually take them. This has happened. Take them across the street to get them a soda that they can drink in class. They can be on their cell phones because they're special. But the other kids who aren't part of the club, well, it's okay if words like fascist come out towards these kids. So they're openly working to reshape the hearts and minds of our children, or as one very prominent voice in Utah who is, I don't know if I would say in the pocket, but I would say has control and has strong relationships with many of our elected officials. Her name is Becky Edwards. And what she has said is, we want to fundamentally transform Utah. This is a woman who's very much involved, and that's very much what she wants to do. Believe she has a relative who is part of the queer community, and that is becoming the focus of schools. If you go to your school's pages and you start looking at student success centers and you start following the lines, it will show you links for inclusive policies in the classroom. And once again, what you have to understand is that the words mean something different. So let me take that back to Charlie, because I've seen multiple times where his quote about empathy has been one word, like one sentence has been taken out of the whole quote. And he talks about empathy and he says, it's been used, it's been weaponized. And I promise you, it has. It has been used and weaponized. You are only empathetic if you are progressive. If your empathy goes to the fact that you've got a bunch of young men who don't know, who are shiftless and what they're going to do for the rest of their life because they're in America and they can't get a good job because good jobs go to illegal immigrants who will take less money. And your empathy goes to those kids. You are then a fascist. You are then a bigot. How about the people who are stealing your children's birthright? What are they? They're nothing. They're the elite professionals that you should trust. This is where Utah is. I have had many parents say, what in the world is going on in school? I've sent a message to the teacher, and the response I get back is, trust us, we are the experts. There's no humility there. There's no partnership there. We are the experts. This week, the majority of our schools stayed mum, silent. They didn't talk about September 11th, and they didn't talk about the death, the murder over free speech. They just said nothing. That is Utah. I will shout out, though, that there were some schools, there were some charter schools that intentionally made a commitment to free speech and honored Mr. Kirk's legacy. They didn't say, we support everything he said. We don't support everything he said. They said he had a right to say it. And he understood that when discourse ends, violence begins. And that is something that a well-informed populace should know. But instead, by the time they get to high school, the kids are told, ooh, politics, they're kind of boring. You know, I used to really be involved. I used to really care about politics, but it's just too heavy, man. Just yeah, we don't need that. Telling our kids that they should not be involved in their futures is robbing them of their futures. That's what we're doing here. So we have ally programs, bathroom ally programs where people are told, you know, be the kind friend, make sure that your transitioning friend or your confused friend feels safe in the bathroom. That is Soviet level Stasi stuff. Basically, report on the people who don't make your friend feel comfortable in the bathroom. We are raising narcissists under the name of keeping people safe. And the problem with that is that when you tell people they are unsafe, they're unsafe, they're unsafe, you're feeding that into their mind. You're spreading a cancer. And we have been doing that. This is why I believe that Utah is sick. Our children are sick because parents have been conditioned to check out. I'm sure there's things I've said that you guys are like, oh, I don't know what she's talking about. But parents have been conditioned to check out, to trust the experts. A young woman once asked me, well, she told me, she said, us kids know something is wrong. The more they tell us that we need to have inclusion, the more divided that we are. And as kids know, so when are the adults going to stand for us? That question has never left me. Charlie Kirk wanted to leave behind a legacy of courage, and his courage was contagious. His movement was spreading because he called young people to reason and he rejected infantilizing them. He rejected telling them that their feelings matter more than anything else. And I promise you, I've seen it in curriculum books. They are saying specifically, I would never have come up with this on my own. My brain doesn't work this way. They're saying specifically, children should be steered towards pathos as it's more effective in advocating / activism work. Children should be steered towards pathos and to ignore logos or logos, however you say it. Like I said, I would never have come up with these words. So children should ignore logic and lean into emotion, lean into, I don't feel safe. That is not the same as saying you are not safe. You know who was not safe? The conservatives out there going, are we next? We were not safe, literally. And the second after we were not safe, we got up and moved to the next place. We did the next thing. When you tell them that their feelings matter more than anything else, they are emotionally debilitated, they are weak, and they are controllable. Groups like Stronger Together, Better Utah, One Utah, and Equality Utah push the opposite. They push that our children must be taken care of by big government. And you need to understand that many of the people involved in these groups are running for office. You will be electing them. Stronger Together was touting how proud they are that their people are the ones that are going to be on the ballot. And you don't have a choice because you've been told that politics are boring and you shouldn't care. And these are people who openly went after, well, sort of openly, they went after texts that we've seen that have said, this person isn't going to support our LGBTQIA plus youth. No, they were just going to support all youth. See, real inclusion means everyone gets a seat at the table. Progressive inclusion is a repeat of the worst parts of history. It means that there is an out group. Who's had an out group? Think about that. Who has had an out group? Let's talk about our governor. And I get that I am treading on thin ice here. I will give him credit for his diplomatic response. I will even say sometimes I'm convinced he wants to do the right thing, but I think that he's very much a progressive. I honestly think that Governor Spencer Cox wouldn't mind being Keira Starmer and that he goes where the wind blows. I have sat in an office with him and talked to him about my concerns with ethnic studies, um, why we are anti DEI, and he used us. We stood in his office. He took a picture of with us, and by us, I mean a group of minorities, a group of Black people. He took a group with a picture with us. But then the people that he endorsed when they were running for office were the people who stick with the NEA agenda, the people who stick with the globalism, who literally said World Economic Forum and us are partnering for our schools. That's who he stuck with. So while people are saying, wow, what a stunning, brave stump speech, the reality is, whether they intended it or not, and it's hard for me to believe that they didn't because behind closed doors, a lot of these groups are quite awful. They have the blood on their hands since 2020 of openly saying disparaging things about conservatives. Before, it felt like before my name was even on the ballot, people were saying she's right wing MAGA. My favorite thing they call me is Black MAGA. Now, MAGA, if you don't know, means Make America Great Again. I just would like to go back to before the insanity of saying, please, big government, take care of us. That's where I fall, but that had nothing to do with my campaign, nor did my race. I just believed everybody deserved a seat at the table. I am Charlie. I believed everyone had deserved a seat at the table, and I worked hard to make that happen. Our Many of our elected leaders, our clergy, our neighbors, our teachers all say, don't make waves, be peacekeepers. That is very different than being a peacemaker. I will never advocate for violence, but I do think we need to get mad. The things that have been targeted towards our kids for many are ridiculous. They are breaking their minds. And that's why I was not surprised about this young man. Do I think he was a monster? Yeah. I also think he was broken, and I think that he was a pawn. And I have had the privilege of knowing people who have come out of the cult of progressivism. And they're such beautiful souls. And he was not there. He's deeply, deeply rooted in progressive cult. I love the fact that he's not purple haired and doing whatever. I mean, I guess he does have a a boyfriend who is transitioning, but he looks like what he is, what he was, the boy next door, your neighbor, the kid who might have played with your kids. And was he exposed by the internet alone? Who knows? I mean, we do know that he had apparently a very large internet connection. But I know I know that throughout Utah, there's this safety culture. There's this, you can only be virtuous if you're a victim. And if you're a victim and anyone hurts you, then you can hurt them back however you need to, because you are virtuous. You are the hero in your own mind. We created this. And when I've gone to DC, when I've gone to Sacramento, when I've gone to these big conventions, when I've gone to New Orleans, and I sit in a room with people, they all say, "What is up with Utah?" Utah was the place we never expected this to happen. What is up with it? So let me be clear. Silence is not speech. I'm sorry, silence is not peace. Silence allows socialism to spread. Our children need heroes. When adults model weakness, when they stay quiet, when they are afraid to speak truth, when they know it clear as day, but they're afraid, when they do that, then that's all their children see. But more than that, when adults model weakness, activists pick up the slack. They're building youth centers. And we think, oh, that's good for our homeless youth. But how many homeless youth do we have in Payson? They're building youth centers because youth centers will give them the things and separate them from their family units. Many of our clubs, not all of them, but many, and you have to do your due diligence. Many of our clubs are about radicalizing and liberating, their words, liberating and radicalizing the next generation. Charlie, when asked by a gay student, what would you do with me, gave a very simple response. He said, "You are more than just the fact that you're gay. Don't put yourself in a box." That's my paraphrasing of what he said. But he did say you are more than that. And he said, "I don't think that you should identify first as your gender. Are you at this university? Are you doing something good for your life? Do you agree with us on a lot of things? Then welcome to the party." That's what he actually said. He refused to let kids be put in boxes. And to me, that's the best form of compassion that we can have. The first thing I said to my students last week was, like me or love me, I don't care about emotions. I mean, I do care about you as a person, but if somebody falls down on the ground and decides that they're going to have a breakdown in my class, I'm going to step right over it because we don't have time, and that's not serving you. Instead, we have had a governor who has sat with the LGBTQ kids with their wristbands or their armbands, not their star, because they're not educated enough to understand that the armband was for the baddies. And he doesn't correct that. And he sits and demotes and lets them talk about their feelings. Meanwhile, there have been a number of kids that I have served that have been on the queer spectrum, and they've loved me until they've gotten on my social media and realized that I'm a conservative. Because in my classrooms and in my interactions, in my visiting youth groups, whatever it is that I'm doing, I don't care about the color of their skin or their gender. I care that they are uniquely and wonderfully made. I am Charlie. As I drove home from the UVU, I passed a sign that read, "How could anyone be against diversity?" But it wasn't really a question. It's a tool of shame. If you don't support diversity in the way that we want you to, which means open borders, well, then you're a bigot. You should be afraid of. And that is literally the way it looks. It looks like a person is harassing like this in the picture, but they're saying, how could anyone be how could anyone be afraid of diversity? Meanwhile, the progressives are extremely afraid of diversity of thought. So afraid that a man was killed for having diversity of thought. Different colors, races, genders can all be beautiful, can all be interesting, can all be like, ooh, I want to sit down and talk to you because I want to know your story. But if your story alone puts you in a place that's higher than another person, that's ugly. That is oppression. I believe the diversity is beautiful when we have assimilation. That's my own personal thing. If you don't have some level of assimilation, then you have no country. And to even say that is considered hate speech and harmful and makes me a bigot to a lot of people in the education world right here in rural Utah. That is why what happened on Wednesday matters. It's accumulation of teaching that kindness means silencing truth, that it is good to not tolerate the intolerant. The boy who pulled the trigger wasn't evil, but he was broken. And the system that created him and that continues to normalize this fragility in our kids. Look at that boy. I can think of 6 boys on my block that he could be, including my own son. Look at him. So the system that continues to normalize this fragility and rage, that system brought in by the progressive elites that think that their newfound pseudoscience hate is empowering and enlightening, that is evil. That is systemic bigotry. Fill in whatever kind you want. If I haven't made it very clear, I know what it is to be hated for speaking boldly. I know the fear of wondering, is my car going to get blown up? Am I going to get shot? Am I safe to be with friends? And I still want to encourage you to do it anyway. Because we are Charlie. The morning that Charlie died, I listened to the video where he said, he was asked what, I'm sorry, it's not correct. I listened to the video from the day that Charlie was asked what he wanted to pass on when he died. And he answered, a man who stood with courage for his faith. His faith drove him, and his courage made him unshakable. Charlie Kirk became a martyr on Wednesday. And whether or not you want to use the word saint, it really doesn't matter. But he increasingly and unceasingly worked for good, for hope, and for the next generation. I cannot tell you how many young people were saying he's the only person who talked to us. Do you know what that tells me? Where are their parents? Where is the connection? Have we checked out? Have we thought, oh, we're done. We've raised them, we're done. He's the only person who talked to them. Charlie's faith made him unshakable. And that's the thing. So many people think that we in Utah are a religious people, so we are driven by faith. But no, we are driven by compliance. People stand up here and tell us what to do. Sometimes they'll ask, does the community want to do this? And they'll say, oh, I need to ask. We should get the bishop involved. Why? No, I don't have a problem with getting the bishop involved, but why can't you do it for yourself? So Utah is filled with trauma-informed care, with forced compassion that really isn't. That's the culture that we live in. We live in a place where when we speak, people will screenshot, share, and tap us for hate. And we do it anyway. Speak the truth anyway. Stand with courage. That's where we're at. I'm going to go look and see if there's any comments. There's a whole bunch. Oh no. People are saying the volume is a little low. I'm so sorry. I hope you could hear it. Interesting. You and people change you. You don't repeat I can't read. I'm sorry, I can't read what you're saying there. Charlie was mainstream. I would agree. That's why I am Charlie. That's why that is taking off like so many people, because he wasn't really radical. Charlie said what the majority of people were too afraid to say, and he said it often, and he knew. There's one video that you can watch of him where he talks about, I guess I could maybe turn up my volume now. There's one video where um he talks about what he gets called. He talks about all the things that the death threats. I think he had to know. I think there have been enough people in Utah that are connected enough to say Utah is a blue state with a red kind of, I don't know, like a red lens over it. We use that. It's used to control, and people think that we're safe here. Trust me, I get that, because I moved here from a true blue state. I moved here from Washington thinking I am going to go to Utah. I'm going to my husband's rural town, and I'm not going to have to worry about anything, and I'm going to get my son through school and things will be fine. And then I got here and I saw what they're doing. I mean, even on our own page, as we're saying, we're going to have a Charlie Kirk walk, which if you're in Utah, come. We're going to walk for Charlie next Sunday. And even then, when we're saying those kind of things, people in our own little rural town are making mocking and disparaging comments and saying things like, no decent person is going to go. I don't understand how people don't understand that this isn't a repeat of history. There had to be a place where you mistrusted and hated your neighbors enough to allow them to get piled up in trucks and on trains. There had to be a starting point for that. You can't hate one mainstream and not the other. Oh, okay. I understand. That's what you're saying. I don't think that I think that for the left, it's more like they've leaned into the left, where the mainstream right is different than the what I would call the far right, which I do believe. I just think the far right and the far left are basically a circle where it's hatred and conspiracy and I don't know. It's just bitter, and I don't want anything to do with it. I care about the normal everyday person who is being manipulated by both sides of that. Hearing bad things is one problem. When you hear them falsely promoting like fatty foods is healthy, that's not hearing things that's being told. Yeah. Thank you, Let Nick Cook. Thank you. I'm trying. I ticked off, as you can imagine, some people here in Utah, including, and who knows if this would be my conspiracy, but I ticked off the governor's a friend who happens to be a woman of color, and I've never been able to hit past the 1,000th mark. So, and that's okay because it's not really the reason that I do it. I I hope that, especially, I don't mean to sound ageist, but I'm trying so hard to be there for the kids who feel like nobody is there for them. I know a young man who I'm very afraid might end up being the next shooter. And um, all I can do is put out what I hope is goodness and what I hope is analytical thinking. I also teach a bunch of young people that I hope one day will just stumble across and go, "Oh, there's Mrs. B," and stumble across and learn to think. This is the tool I have. So, oh, I'm so glad that I'm glad the volume is better, Rose. Um, this is the tool I have. I am Charlie, right? We are Charlie. We do what we can. Charlie started out as an 18-year-old with a little sign saying, "Prove me wrong," and having conversations. And I think the last thing that I want to say is that, I mean, I'm still angry. I don't think I've slept longer than 8 hours in the last 3 days, but you get to choose what you do with your anger. My anger has motivated me to using names when I'm talking, because before I would never do that. But now I just need to point people in the directions and say, hey, if you're in a room or in a club or whatever with those people, you should probably get yourself out. But I also think that anger can motivate us to action. For me, Charlie Kirk is like he was a captain in our army. And it was funny, I was in church today and the pastor referred to Les Miserables and the empty chairs and empty tables. And just thinking about, he didn't say that, but that's what I thought when he said it. But I just thought, you know what? This is a battle. This is an absolute war, and we have lost a really good captain. But we have not lost the war. And like I said, when I was on the ground and I felt like, oh, this is the moment. This is when it's going to happen. And when that happened or didn't happen, and I just thought, I'm okay. This is okay if this is it. I think that's really important. Yes, I did see Charlie's wife when she spoke about her husband, and I'm so excited that it's going to keep going. You guys, I just want to encourage you who've been here and watched that if you I mean, first, please like and share. I never say that. So please do. Please like, share, and subscribe. Let's see if I can get past this curse that I've had for like 2 years. But also go watch the Turning Point videos. Make yourself watch one. Make yourself listen. And if you don't agree with what Charlie said, that's okay. You don't have to, but it'll be so good for your own mental health to be able to sit and hear another person's opinion, because these bubbles, they don't allow us a seat at the table. A seat at the table means everybody gets to come, even if what they say pisses you off. Everybody gets to come to the table. So I hope this was beneficial for you. That was my experience. If you're a praying person, please pray for my son, because, well, for all of the kiddos who are out there, there's a lot of kids who are afraid. So let me just repeat. We plan on doing a walk for Charlie after his memorial service next Sunday. And I'm very hopeful. I don't know if it'll happen, but I'm very hopeful that the school will be opened and we can finish where this whole thing started. because those kids are afraid. A lot of the kids had said, how do we stand up? How do we stand up when we could get killed for it? And it's, how do we walk back there? How do we stand in those spaces if we don't do it? Regardless of, you know, what could happen, if we don't do it, we give in to fear. And that is the reason that Charlie was killed in front of a group of people. There are other places it could have happened, but he was killed in front of a group of young people because they wanted to demoralize them. They wanted them to say, oh, never, I'm never going to stand up again. Do it anyway. Do it anyway. Thank you so much. I'm glad you listened. And I will talk to you next time. Bye. After I get there.